So with earnings being released August 1st, I just wanted to make a quick update and a quick video on Virgin Galactic, look at some of their financials, look at their income statement, talk about that a little bit, talk about previous results and how price reacted to earnings, and talk about kind of what I'm expecting to see throughout this earnings and moving forward post earnings into that second flight. So let's go ahead and jump right on into it. The first thing we're going to do is take a look at the income statement. All these numbers are going to be in the thousands, so keep that in mind. But over the last couple of quarters, we went from 357 to 767, 869, and then back down to 392 on total revenues. The one thing I do want you guys to note is looking at gross profits compared to total revenues, we actually went from 235 to 177 to negative 300. So we were going down, and then we just finally flipped to 74, which is positive, right? So even though the total revenues were going up and then dropped off a little bit to 392, we actually saw the gross profits declining and then jumped to positive 74. So I just want you guys to keep that in mind. The other couple of things that I want you guys to look at is the operating expenses or the operating expense. That's been kind of getting worse from 109 to 145 to 153 to 163. So it's just getting more and more expensive to operate. Looking at the EBIT, which is earnings before interest and taxes, that's actually been getting worse as well, from 107 to 142 to 147 to negative 156. All of those being negative, right? So it's just getting worse and worse. But the one thing I want you guys to keep in mind, and I talked about this a little bit in the previous video, was that for a company like this that's starting out, that's tackling such a big project, it's not uncommon to see financial statements look like this, right? And that doesn't mean that the company is horrible or the company is bad, or that, things are just getting worse. It's just a part of the process, right? So just keep that in mind. But the one thing I did want to do is show you guys this income statement. That way you guys are kind of aware of, how the company is doing financially. And I'll link this in the description down below so you guys can check it out in more depth. But even though looking at this income statement and looking at their financials, I would say that this wouldn't be a great guide in terms of what we should expect throughout these earnings with price action for the actual stock, right? So that being said, I do want you guys to note over here that every time we've had earnings, we've missed. So this time around, I'm pretty much expecting the same thing. I do expect us to miss earnings. But that being said, gross profits have been increasing, even though revenue kind of dropped off a little bit. So keep that in mind. The one thing I do want you guys to note is what's going on in the charts from a technical perspective, right? And I think this is going to be a lot more helpful for many of you in terms of, hey, what is going to be happening with price action during these earnings August 1st. And that's going to be that looking at previous kind of history as to how price action was reacting. I think looking at the RSI and the MACD is the most helpful thing, and looking at what the price was doing during those earnings, right? Was the price overbought during earnings, or was it oversold, or was it neutral, and how did it react, right? So looking at May of 2022, we're going to look at those earnings as the first ones. And we had price action. Well, we had the stock price be a lot more oversold than overbought. And what did we see when that happened? We actually saw the MACD converge to the upside, and that caused the price of the stock to rally, right? The next earnings that were in August or near August, we actually saw the stock price more so on the overbought side than the oversold side. We saw the indication from the MACD that we are starting to converge to the downside. And what did we see with price action? We actually saw price action push to the downside. The next earnings after that in November, we were looking at the stock price. We were more so neutral, but closer to the overbought side. So we did have a tad bit more room to run before we started seeing that sell-off, which we got a little bit later. We got that indication from the MACD that we're converging to the downside. So we were right over here. We saw the price push a little bit more to the overbought side. And then once we saw that indication from the MACD that we're converging to the downside, we actually saw selling happen and the price head lower to this $3 zone. The next earnings after that, we were in March, and we just flipped to converge to the downside here on the MACD. We were neutral when that happened. And so the price naturally pushed lower to the downside after we saw that push to the upside a little bit earlier. And so earnings after that, we were more so, again, very similar to what we saw over here. We saw the price be more of a neutral but overbought side of things. And so we were right over here, saw a little more of a push to the upside, became extremely overbought, and then saw that drop happen, right? Same indication here on the MACD to the downside. Now we're going into earnings once again, closer to the oversold side, but more so neutral, right? So we aren't extremely oversold. We're more so neutral, but we are seeing a convergence on the MACD to the upside. So what I do want you guys to know is what's different about these earnings is we have volume that's a lot higher. So if you guys look at volume here compared to all the volume back here, we have a lot more volume in the actual stock. We have the second commercial flight coming. We have bottomed out, I would say, from a technical perspective, and we're starting to see that convergence to the upside going into earnings, right? So on top of that, I do want you guys to note that just like we talked about those previous earnings, when we're seeing a stock be more so on the oversold side, odds are we're going to push to the upside just from a technical standpoint, right? And now throw in the fact that, you know, the income statements that we looked at, right? Gross profit is increasing, right? Even though net revenue dropped a little bit, gross profits are increasing. We are having the second commercial flight happening August 10th. So just 9 days after earnings happen. Technicals are adding up, right? And we're going to start seeing monthly flights following this, right? So I do want you guys to know all of this while looking at this. What do I expect to see from the price action? I do anticipate that we're going to see a push at least to this $5 level, which was this previous resistance right up here. We may push higher, but that's going to be that first target for me. And so I do anticipate we're going to push up to this $5 zone. And then after that, we're going to reevaluate. It'd probably take another week for us to see a push up to that. But if you guys watched last week's video when I talked about SPCE, I did say that after this drop off, we're going to see a little bit of consolidation. I do anticipate we're going to see consolidation up until earnings, through earnings, and then we're going to see that push up to the upside going into the 10th, which is going to be that first commercial or second commercial flight, right? So that's just my personal opinion. The other thing I want you guys to know, let me go ahead and clear this up real quick. Another technical pattern that I want you guys to pay attention to is the fact that we are starting to form a double bottom right here, right? And the reason I said that that $5 zone is going to be a potential resistance is because if we do come up to that $5 zone and find resistance right up here, then on the contrary, we're actually going to see a head and shoulders pattern, right? We're going to see a shoulder here, a head here, and another shoulder here. But if we blast through that, then that's just going to be another confirmation that the stock has finally flipped to the upside and we're going to see a lot of positive price action happen. So that's why that $5 zone is so important. I want you guys to pay attention to that. But as of right now, we are looking at that double bottom. We're seeing all of those fundamental and technical elements lining up. So do I expect this price action to pop off and run up to the upside? Absolutely, especially on the 10th or leading up to the 10th. So between earnings and the 10th. So beginning of August, I think that this stock is going to start seeing some positive movement to the upside. Until then, like I said in the previous video, I do anticipate to see a little bit of consolidation up until earnings and then start seeing that push up to the upside. So that's just a quick recap and a quick technical analysis looking at previous earnings that we've seen before, how the price reacted and where the price was from an overbought and oversold standpoint and from a MACD standpoint. Again, over the last, before that first flight that we saw before that, we didn't see any actions being taken by the company. We didn't see very much flights happening. There was some test flights, but again, every time we saw a test flight, price took off, right? So now that we're going to start seeing that second commercial flight happening, and then monthly flights after that, I think that we're in for a nice rally on this particular stock. If you guys have any questions, concerns, or comments, drop them in the comments down below. Let me know what you guys think is going to happen with this stock price. Let me know what you guys thought about the analysis. And again, if you guys do have any questions or you guys have some input that you guys want to drop in the comments below, I'd love to hear it. I do reply to every single comment. Again, we do these videos every single Monday and Friday Mondays, we do overall market analysis on QQQ usually. And then Fridays, we'll either do a quick analysis on SPCE or a similar stock, or it will be a quick lesson, or it's going to be a speech or a talk that happened, right? The last couple of things I want you guys to note is that next week we do have interest rates being announced, so keep that in mind. And then we have earnings with this particular stock, and then we have that second flight. So keep all that in mind. If you guys enjoy this video, make sure to like this video, share it with a friend, comment down below what you guys think is going to be happening with SPCE. Turn on your post notifications, and I'll see you guys on the next one.